everybody can grab their seat, we're going to get going into the afternoon portion of our program. One of the aspects that's been talked about here quite a bit this morning is the need for biosecurity and the prevention of disease, bringing it into our farms. Over the course of the past, what we've been at this around a couple of years, developing a national biosecurity workbook for all our cervid producers. And today I've got one of the people involved with it is Randy Wehrkamp, who has been a long-term producer in Saskatchewan. When it comes to biosecurity, I think Randy's somebody that practices what we preach here. So we felt that he was a good one to give us an overview of what the new workbook looks like, and he can, like I said, tell us if it's doing the job on his farm, it must be doing okay because he's still smiling. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Randy and let him give us a presentation.
Well, the truth of the matter is I drew the short straw. That's why I'm here, not because anybody else couldn't be here speaking about biosecurity. But Harvey is right in the sense of I am a believer in biosecurity, and I remember when we started looking at biosecurity at the broad industry level, and you know, you say biosecurity to a producer and they kind of roll their eyes and they go, oh yeah, really? More of that government regulations, more of that stuff that we don't want to do. And the reality is, you heard this morning that biosecurity is a tool. It's a tool for producers to use so that they can limit risk on their farm from CWD and a lot of other diseases. And frankly, biosecurity is really nothing more than good management. So I'm going to talk a little bit about biosecurity, but in fact, I sort of view the day split into two groups, or two sessions if you wish. This morning's session was the historical perspective of where it started and where we are now, and what the challenges are to a certain degree. But at the same time, it's it's sort of a challenge for new producers coming in, because if you look at some of the information up there, and even for some of us that have been around for a long time, it's kind of, oh boy, I don't know, it doesn't look that good, and it was maybe for some possibly a little bit depressing. But the good news is we have hope, and this afternoon session I think is kind of the part two. So with no disrespect to the people who spoke this morning on the historical side, I think this afternoon session is really the good news session as to what's happening and where we can go. But before I start my presentation, I just want to tell you a quick story, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but there's a lot of husbands in the room, and there's a few veterinarians in the room, and I noticed a few wives in the room, so I hope I haven't singled anybody out with this story. There's a couple back home that has a dog that snores, and nobody likes that, and wives are pretty used to that, but they seem to be bothering the wife a lot more than the husband for some odd reason. So she took the dog to the vet and asked the vet if there was anything that she could do to help stop this dog from snoring. The vet said, well, he said, if you take the dog home and tie a ribbon around his testicles, you'll probably stop snoring. Yeah, okay, sure, she said, yeah, whatever. Well, she went home and later that night went to bed, and husband wasn't home, of course, out doing something or other. And sure enough, the dog starts snoring, and she gets up and she goes to the closet and grabs a piece of red ribbon and ties it carefully around the dog's testicles. Thankfully, sure enough, the dog stopped snoring. Well, the woman was amazed, as you can well imagine. I'm not, by the way, not suggesting that any of the women should take this concept home and necessarily try it. You may get a surprise if you, anyway, different story. But later that night, the husband returns home. And he's been out with the boys, and he might have had a couple too many, and like most wives know, the husbands don't know this because they're sleeping, but most wives who have been part of that scenario understand that the husband usually falls into a pretty heavy bout of snoring shortly after his head hits the pillow. Once again, the wife is awake, and she's thinking, work for the dog, Wonder if it would work. Up she gets, goes to the closet, grabs another ribbon, sure enough, ties it around the husband's testicles, and he's quiet. It's beautiful. Well, he's been out for quite a bit that evening, and about the middle of the night he gets up and staggers into the washroom, and standing there, and he's sort of, well, I won't demonstrate, but he's standing there looking down. He's standing there looking down, and he shakes, kind of shakes his head, and he said, "Oh, what's this? A ribbon around," and he said, "I can't believe it, blue ribbon around my testicles." So he goes back out, and he's on his way back to bed, and he's shaking his head, trying to figure out what happens, and he leans over to his dog, and he whispers, "I don't know where we were, but we got first and second." So, that has nothing to do with biosecurity that I'm aware of. That has a lot to do with saving your marriage, perhaps. Okay, so when I put this presentation together, I didn't really know if I was going to be, I assumed I was speaking more to producers than to the group that's at the table. I noticed that I think I'm maybe the only non-doctor speaking this afternoon, so bear with me. We're going to walk through what biosecurity is, a little bit of structure for the farm. We handed out copies of the biosecurity document that we developed in Ottawa in conjunction with our partners. If you didn't get one and you would like one, hold your hand up and somebody will bring you one. This is a project that we worked on for about 2 years. It was made up of producers, veterinarians at the provincial level, certainly CFIA was involved in it. I don't know if I'm missing anybody else, but it was a cross-section of people right from Ottawa through Quebec, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And when we started on it, I think it was, like I said, a bit of a challenge to see where it was going to go. But I think we ended up with a document, and like many of our documents, this is a voluntary document. We're not suggesting to you, nor is CFI telling you, or government telling you, or producers or CCA telling you, that this is a must. What we've put together is a biosecurity document, which is a working document for you, the producer, to use as you see fit. It's a recommendation and a suggestion of good and best practices and concerns and issues that you should be aware of in the management of your business. We've just completed it. The hard copy is, you have the first hard copy, I think, pretty much circulated last weekend in Alberta and here. It is to be published and available on the CFA website in April of this year. So hopefully that happens, but in the interim you certainly have a working copy. There's a second part to it, which I'm going to mention now because I'll probably forget at the end of the session. There's a guide that's coming out as a supplement to this document. The guide will have in it sample documents to use for recording management practices, medications, timing, dates, inventories, and so on. And that's really what the user guide will do for you and help you implement as much or parts of this document that you feel are applicable to your own operation. Okay, so the definition that we've used for this particular exercise is the first bullet, defined as a set of practices used to minimize the presence of pests and transmission of pathogens in animal and plant populations. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. For the purposes of this exercise in this document, there was a lot of discussion about domestic and wild cervids. And as I understand it, the term pest within the broad context applies to all creatures great and small that are just that, a pest. So for the purposes of this exercise, a pest also includes wild cervids that would interfere with our business. It's based on 4 key principles: management of farm and management of animal health, management of people, protocols, and record keeping. So those are 4 of the key sections that are in the document, and within that there's a lot of extra information that I'll show you in just a minute. It's not a new concept, and for most of us, biosecurity is something that we're doing now. We just don't define it as biosecurity. So just as you would not let 4 feet of manure build up in your handling system or in your runways or in your stock trailers, you would keep them clean. That's a biosecurity step. So biosecurity is something that you're doing now. It's not a new concept, but it is an important concept. And you certainly heard a number of speakers this morning address the issue of biosecurity as one of the key principles or key ways that we can start to mitigate risk and influence our farm management practices in the area of disease control. The purpose of it, well, is really developed to serve a national voluntary standard. And the key word in that statement is voluntary, because this is, as I said, not something we want to force onto our producers, but we want to make sure, just as a part of our mandate is as a national organization, to ensure that we give our producers every tool that every other livestock sector has to manage their business and ensure and continue to build in our relationship with mainstream agriculture. Contains guidelines and recommendations to assist producers, serves as a tool and guideline to assist producers to better develop or enhance their biosecurity standards. It's designed as a support and to complement other management tools, such as the on-farm food safety program that we worked with and developed in conjunction with CFIA about 10 years ago. It's not intended to be adopted by federal or, that's never good when that happens.
Just click anywhere else.
Just click somewhere on the wall.
Yep. Click on the slide.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm trying. Well, I think you have to do this, don't you? There you go. Just a moment of panic. Who was it this morning was up here, and I looked over to the person beside me and said, thank God somebody else doesn't know how to work one of those things. It's not intended to be adopted by federal, provincial, or territorial governments to be used for law or for regulation. One of the interesting developments, though, is that this morning when you heard about voluntary herd certification program, there is a biosecurity element within the voluntary herd certification program. And that's simply put in there because, as was spoke about, there is a concern when we look at the number of certified herds that have contracted CWD. And certainly one of the drivers in enhancing the voluntary herd certification program was to increase the rigidity of the program and the requirements of certification and raise those standards with the intent of creating a stronger statement that enrollment in the program supports good disease management. Why now? Well, all livestock sectors are working on biosecurity. This isn't something exclusive to us. We're not being picked on. We're not being singled out. Cattle has this, chickens have it, swine, I believe, and several other the livestock sectors already have their own biosecurity standards. Sheep have it, and in fact ours is somewhat related to the sheep one because of the relationship between CWD and scabies. So it really is another step in keeping us online with mainstream agriculture. Not only that, but customers demand it. I mean, we all know that when you go down to the grocery store, you see that big, lovely organic stamp on everything. Consumers are demanding to know where their products are coming from, where they're raised, which barn did they come out of, who's the mother of the chicken, of the cow, of the this, of the that they're putting on their table. We heard an interesting story last weekend. There was a fellow by the name of Trent Luce speaking at the Alberta Elk Convention, and for those, he's a rancher out of Nebraska that is a public speaker and speaks on I guess, an advocate for agriculture as a whole. And he told the story how he was sitting in the plane on his way up to one of his speaking engagements, and they were talking about food, and the lovely lady sitting beside him was having chicken wings, but she was sort of talking about being a vegetarian or vegan and not eating meat, and he kind of said, well, you know, you're eating chicken wings, and she says, well, that's okay, they grow back every year, it's not a big deal. You know, there's a lot of things that consumers don't know, and there is a lot of things that they do know. And our responsibility is, as an industry, to influence and control our product line to the point that we can deliver that product with confidence to the consumer. So our consumers are demanding it. Verified standards and farms drive market confidence and expansion, more basically what I'm saying. The impact of disease on our farm can be devastating. Biosecurity is really just a key management tool. One of the few tools that we as producers can actually control and influence. And certainly it's going to be part of the revised voluntary herd certification program, and as I've said repeatedly, is nothing but good management. Benefits, well, it protects human health, protects producers, protects the environment, aids in market development, builds consumer confidence, proactively addresses issues such as animal health, ensures that farm operational standards are consistent and known to all. One of the differences with this document and what we have done, or when we talk about biosecurity in the traditional sense, this document strongly recommends and suggests that your biosecurity plan is a hard copy plan. That doesn't mean what we gave you today. It means that you take the information we have today and build your own biosecurity plan so that you can address those 4 key areas that we talked about. It addresses issues like how do you handle folks coming to your farm. Whether it's a CFI veterinarian, your local veterinarian, your feed truck, the folks that come in and clean your corrals. Do you insist on any biosecurity standards with them or for them before they enter your property? Where were they on the last farm? When veterinarians come to our farm, whether they're CFIA or my local veterinarian, I ask them that question. Where have you been? Have you disinfected your boots? Please leave your truck in the main yard. I don't want your truck by my handling system. That's biosecurity. That is nothing but good management and good judgment, in my opinion, and you have a responsibility to control that. So within the terms of biosecurity and this structure, we're asking, or we, I guess as one of the co-authors of this, the CCA, are suggesting and recommending that you take this information and put it into hard copy so that everybody has access to it. So if you have people coming, and you as farm operator, you're not at home, but your wife is at home, the hired man is at home, they have a reference source that they can go to that defines the protocol to be used in a variety of situations. The standard is voluntary, it is not mandatory. So again, it is a set of risk-based management guidelines. It is not a list of must-dos. It is based on target outcomes achievable in a variety of ways. That's up to you to determine. It is not a prescriptive set of practices. It's specific to biosecurity practices used by the Canadian cervid industry, and it has been taken from another sector, or it is not taken from another sector or country and redesigned just for us. It's practical, science-based, considering the transmission of infectious pathogens across the industry. It's not idealistic, developed without consideration for the feasibility of implementation. It was a collaborative project developed by producers, supported by subject experts, advisory groups, and government. And it is not the work of one stakeholder. And let me tell you that as we worked through this, there was a lot of discussion, some very heated and some very emotional, because some of the things that are talked about here are very difficult to achieve, and for some people they may not be achievable. But in a broader context, they're still good biosecurity practices. As an example, I mean, I think everybody, we'll go through this pretty quickly. I think everybody's been on this farm. You know, I don't really even have to say very much. You can see that it's probably not safe to handle animals in. It's overgrown, it hasn't been maintained, there's machinery sitting off to the side. And then you can progress upwards or downwards or sideways to this farm. And actually, I think I know where that farm is. You know, but take a look at that. Is that a safe place to handle animals? Is it an area and a site that would be host to rats, mice, you know, disease, it's just really not a place where we would take any pride. And ask yourself this, as a consumer, as a supplier of consumable products, and a consumer comes to your farm to purchase part of that product, is this what you want them to see? Does this represent what you believe the cervid industry should be across Canada? Never mind just on your farm, because you as a producer are part of a bigger story. You are part of an industry, and that industry impacts, and your actions impact that industry on a higher, broader level. This is something that is actually a major irritant of mine. I know when we fenced our property, we had that. We did not put elk on our property until that was gone. That to me is a disaster waiting to happen, but I see it in lots of pastures, and people will make their own decisions as to how they choose to manage and what they want to put into it. But that's obviously a major safety issue. This is one that I think, again, is actually fairly important to me. We have our own trailer. We don't custom haul animals. We haul only our animals in our trailer. When we finish hauling our animals, before the trailer comes home, it goes straight to the car wash, or I have high pressure washers at home, and the trailer is completely washed and cleaned and disinfected before I even put the trailer away. The odd exception, of course, if it's 30 below, it's kind of hard to turn your trailer into an ice cube. But certainly when you're using trailers, again, nothing but a place for flies and maggots and disease to spread, and certainly not a healthy environment to move animals in. Not suggesting that you shouldn't be doing custom hauling or anything like that, but there is a protocol. In fact, there is a protocol in your biosecurity document on how to address that. And certainly the little rodents are always a problem. I'm just going to take you through one of the principles to show you the structure that is used in the document, and then the rest of it you can go through yourself at your leisure. So the principle number 2 is animal health management practices. The goal, maximize the health, well-being, productivity of the herd, and so on and so forth. There are 6 specific strategies within this document that are used to support that goal. Strategy 1, sourcing cervids. Target outcome, animals are sourced from suppliers with herds of known status or health status of new animals aligned with your current herd. And you've heard that spoke about as a good management practice and a way, again, of mitigating risk. Everything that is in this document and in this guide is designed to mitigate risk for you. So description within that strategy, new animals pose a significant risk for the introduction of disease. If anybody wants to challenge that statement, feel free. To resident cervids on the premises, it's important to note that animals may be subclinical prior to their arrival on the farm. Measures can be taken to reduce this risk by testing for disease or veterinary health exams prior to animals. However, some infected animals may not be identified depending on the stage. So, ask you to take a look at your own environment. How do you handle, if you bring in animals, do you bring them in from a variety of sources? Do you bring them in and isolate them on your farm? Do you use a veterinarian to check their health before they come to the farm? Again, your decision as to how you choose to respond to that as a producer, but if you look at it objectively, those are all legitimate questions and all considerations. So, what are the best practices within this strategy? Well, consider the use of semen or embryos if you're introducing new genetics. Purchase herd additions, as mentioned, from a limited number of suppliers with known herd status. Know the historical health status of the premises from which animals are purchased. If purchasing through live auctions where commingling may occur, additional biosecurity is important. And really, I think what we've seen over the last year, certainly in our industry, is a move away from live animal auction to internet auctions, where the animals either pictured and the pedigrees known, but the animals aren't co-mingling in a common environment where the transmission of disease, not only from animal to animal is an issue, but what about from premise to animal when you're on an off-site, off-farm location where you don't know the history of that premise. Obtain and review all health records for all new animals and consider veterinarian certification of health as much as they can. Strategy 2, separate herd additions, return cervids of undetermined health status for, returning cervids of undetermined health status for the resident herd. Minimize contact with other livestock, develop and implement a herd health program of your own, vaccinations, isolation, introduction of animals into the herd, manage and treat sick animals, again in isolation, develop a response plan for disease outbreaks. Just on that point, and one of the things that the producers in Saskatchewan should know if you haven't known, you did receive notice of this from Betty's team, is that you all are required to have a premise ID. By when, Betty?
The regulations came into effect in December, but we required it for new licenses this year already. So as they are licensed, they will be required.
And for people that have a current license?
When it next needs to be renewed.
When it next needs to be renewed.
It'll have to be in place, but if you do it ahead of time, it makes it easier.
Yeah, and it does, and I actually applied for mine, it took about 3 minutes, and you can see how handy I am with a computer. So summary, I mean, there's 4 other strategies that go with that. We're not going to go through them all, you don't need to do that. But the summary today, most of what you do is by memory. Biosecurity, a biosecurity plan is recorded and available to all farm personnel. It includes training of your staff, processes to be defined around introducing new animals, people coming to your farm, and just about every other possibility that you can think of. The BHCP has a biosecurity element, and although its document is voluntary, it provides an excellent source in anticipation of higher standards to come. A strong biosecurity plan enhances your marketability and increases the volume of your animals. That's getting pretty close to the end. Implementing or enhancing biosecurity is not new, but it is good management. Thank you. Any questions? And no, I don't know where you can get ribbon. Okay, thanks very much.